Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jack Daly, Director of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another in the series of General Electric Aviation lectures. This series is the museum's longest-running program supported by a single sponsor. Since 1982, General Electric has helped the museum achieve its mission through this lecture series. General Electric is represented tonight by our event co-hosts, Rich Douglas and Dean Gissendaner. Will you two gents please stand and be recognized? Here they are. Okay. Events like this would not be possible without this sponsorship. So we are deeply indebted to you for the what we figure it was 28 years, I guess, of service, and we really do appreciate it. Before we start, let me just give you an update on some of the things that we have going on in our two museums. On the 19th of November, we'll open the Baron of Hilton Pioneers of Flight Gallery, which will include a Center for Early Learning, which means 3 through 8-year-olds. And we're teaching them physics and trying to interest them in math, science, and technology. And we found that if we can get them this early, that we can get them going without being intimidated by these subjects, and hopefully that they'll continue and actually seek careers in aerospace and other engineering endeavors. But it has been a great experience for us. We've actually opened half of it. This was a gallery that opened with this museum in 1976, so it's the first time that it's been refurbished, and it's now been, we've had extended research, and additional artifacts are now being included that bring out some of the capabilities of the Lindberghs and others who were operating this time. But the exhibition will show how aviation achievements in the 20s and 30s influenced popular culture, and how individuals such as Amelia Earhart and Robert Goddard pushed existing technological or social limits of flight. So I would encourage you to take a look. And here at the National Air and Space, we actually emphasize that we're one museum with 2 locations. And out at the Hazy Center, and by the way, we call that Chantilly, Virginia, because if we say at Dulles Airport, you'll take the access road and you won't be able to get there. So it's off Route 28. If you do take the access road, take 28 south to get to it. But we are opening a new wing out there. It's actually phase 2, which is going to include the restoration facility, which is named after Mary Baker Engen, the wife of Admiral Don Engen, who was my predecessor here. And we have the Emil Buehler Conservation Lab, and we have the archives, which will all be consolidated for the first time in the history of the museum. So we're very anxious to get that going. From the mezzanine overlooking the hangar, you'll be able to view the actual restoration and preservation of artifacts. So we think this will be a very interesting opportunity for the visitor, because it's actually going to combine what we've done at Garber and here over the years. And the Garber tours have been very popular. In fact, we've heard a lot of complaints when we had to shut them down during our move. So now get ready. We're about to start doing it again. We're going to have the entire facility then, once we get this part open, will be 700,000 square feet of exhibit area, plus we'll have two IMAX theaters, a planetarium, simulator zones, an observatory, 2 restaurants, 2 stores, classrooms, learning labs, and several reception areas. So we're increasing our opportunity to do things like we're doing here tonight. So we're very anxious to get this moving. To begin the program, though, I'd like to recognize Mr. Rod Lewis. Mr. Lewis is the president and CEO and founder of Lewis Energy. You may know him better, however, as the pilot and owner of Glacier Girl. In addition to owning and flying this historic icon, Mr. Lewis also owns 15 restored World War II airplanes, and or better known as his warbirds. And Rod, would you stand up and be recognized, please? I need to change something I just said. That's actually 25 warbirds, not 15. In 1994, the museum's lecture, the General Electric Lecture in November of 1994, featured Pat Epps and Richard Taylor of the Greenland Expedition Society. 13 years before, they had begun searching for the lost squadron of two B-17Es and six P-38Fs that disappeared after making emergency landings in Greenland because of bad weather in 1942. The Greenland expedition team located the Ice and Tomb Squadron in 1988 and then were able in 1992 to pull the P-38 from its frozen chamber. Managing the extraction of this aircraft is our tonight's speaker. Bob Cardin will detail that remarkable recovery as well as the rest of the story. The restoration to flying condition of this most famous P-38, Glacier Girl. Bob was born in Pawtucket, Rhode Island in 1946. He attended local schools and graduated from Providence College in 1968 with degrees in general education and military science. He entered the Army in September of '68. During his 20-year military career, he held various staff, flight, and leadership positions before retiring with the rank of lieutenant colonel. Achieving aviation and instructor pilot ratings in both helicopters and fixed wing, he flew in combat during the Vietnam War. Upon retirement from the Army, he began a career in private industry. In early '92, he accepted a position with the Greenland Expedition Society as project manager for the recovery of the P-38 from 268 feet inside the Greenland Ice Cap. After recovering the aircraft, he continued to manage the 10-year, multi-million-dollar restoration of Glacier Girl. During Glacier Girl's restoration, Bob established the Lost Squadron Museum, served on the board of directors, and was president of the organization. Since 2006, he's been responsible for all of the Lewis aeronautical assets, which hold 37 aircraft, including Glacier Girl. He resides in San Antonio, Texas, with his wife, Kathy. Please welcome Mr. Bob Cardin. Bob?
Can you hear me now? There we go. All right, good. Well, first of all, I'd like to just let you know how happy I am to be here tonight to tell you about my adventure that started back in 1992. I've been giving this presentation basically the same way it is tonight since '93, and this has always been what I wanted to do with this speech, is to be here in the air and space to tell this just remarkable story. And what I want to do to start it off is to go back in time and explain, first of all, how the airplanes and why the airplanes landed on the glacier. And then from there, we'll go into the recovery of the airplane, the restoration, the first flight, and what Glacier Girl is actually doing today. Back as we were entering the war in Europe in 1942, the main way that we were getting our arms and munitions and airplanes to the European theater was to put the arms on ships, sail across the North Atlantic, and the Germans would send out the U-boats and sink our aircraft, and we were losing about 38% of our war stockage. General Hap Arnold, the general in charge of the Army Air Corps at the time, was not happy with those numbers. So he directed his staff to come up with a plan to fly the airplanes to the European theater. Well, they came up with a plan that was called Operation Bolero. And simply speaking, the Bolero flights were flying the airplanes to England. Here's a map that shows the routes. They started off from Presque Isle, Maine, Goose Bay, Labrador, and they would either go to Bluey West 1 or Bluey West 8. Then they would fly to Reykjavik, refuel, and then on to Prestwick. Well, Glacier Girl was part of the second and third combined flights of this Operation Bolero. It was Tomcat Green and Tomcat Yellow. And what happened with those flights that did meet in Presque Isle, Maine, they made it to Goose Bay. The P-38s ended up in Bluey West 8, and the B-17s ended up in Bluey West 1. Early in the morning on July 15th of 1942, the airplanes, the B-17s repositioned the BW-8, they briefed the flight, and then the airplanes all departed for Reykjavik. There were 6 P-38s and 2 B-17 bombers that left BWA, Blue West A, and they would fly along this route to Reykjavik. When they got about halfway across Greenland, they ran into bad weather, and they were forced to fly into the clouds. And this is when the Lost Squadron started to get in some trouble. when they flew into the clouds, they lost their ability to navigate, so now they were flying dead reckoning, that we call that time, distance, and heading. And they continued on, using that technique until they thought that they were close to Reykjavik. At that point there, they called for landing instructions, and they received back a coded message that the airport was closed because of ice fog. Believing that, they turned, and just as we show here, and they were going to go to their alternate at BW1, and they flew for a couple more hours, and then again called for landing instructions, and they received the same coded message that the airport was closed. They believed that, so they said, well, what we'll do is we'll just go back to BW8, wait for better weather, because they knew the weather was going to be good there, and then wait for better weather and then continue on. They turned to the northwest and started to fly, and they flew for another couple of hours. They were airborne almost 8 hours that day. And the clouds started to break up, so they dove underneath the clouds and attempted to orient themselves, try to figure out where they were, and they were really confused because they found that the ocean was on the wrong side of Greenland. And they thought that they'd be over here, and they were actually over in this general area. Safety in numbers, there was a lot of discussion on what they should do. They were low on fuel. They decided to stay together and do control landings on the glacier, all in the same area. Well, the P-38s landed first, and then about 2 hours later, the B-17s landed because they had more fuel. The first man to land on a glacier, his name was Brad McManus, and he put his wheels down, and the glacier looked hard, and he also had received a briefing, all the pilots did, that nobody had ever landed on a glacier, but they thought maybe it could be done. And these guys were young, they didn't know anything about glaciers, and it looked just like a frozen pond, so Brad said he did like a mock landing. He bounced on it, felt pretty good, so he decided he'd go ahead and land. And this is what happened. As Brad lost his lift, his nose wheel dug into the snow, and his airplane flipped over on his back. Brad got out a couple of minutes later. He was not injured. But all the other guys, pilots being smart as they are, and they said, well, if you land with your wheels down, you're going to flip over. So we'll leave our gear up and land that way. This is an aerial photograph of the airplanes on the glacier. Here's Glacier Girl over here. This is about 900 feet, that distance to the B-17 Big Stoop. This took place on July 15th of 1942. It's the largest forced landing in Air Force history, even to date. There was 6 P-38s, 2 B-17s, and 25 men. They were, the 25 men, after they landed, they lived in the B-17s for 11 days until a rescue team came and got them. They were first located on day number 7 by a Navy PBY that flew over. And then from that day on, planes would fly over and drop them supplies. So they, not only did they know that they would be rescued, then they had supplies also. They were kind of concerned about maybe the Germans were going to come and capture them, and they didn't know that until this PBY found them, and they were good. Small fishing village from a Massilic, about 97 miles away, had 5 men and a radio station there. They came in 2 boats, went 14 miles inland with this dog sled, and they marshaled the men together, and they walked 14 miles back to the sea. They were picked up there by the Coast Guard ship, the Northland, and brought back to safety. They were debriefed, went back to the States, picked up more P-38s, and continued on in the war. Here are the men from the Lost Squadron. I want to point out 2 of them. That there is Harry Smith. Harry was the pilot of P-38 Glacier Girl. And I'll show you a picture of Glacier Girl here in a minute and explain to you what good of a job he did. And this is Lieutenant Brad McManus. Brad was the first pilot to land. He flipped over. And you'll see him later on in my presentation. He shows up a little bit later. Here's a picture of a Glacier Girl that was taken on the ice cap on the day that they landed. And this is the picture that we actually used to determine what airplane we wanted to recover from that group. And you can see that the props are straight. So when Harry landed the airplane, He shut the engines down and feathered the props, so there was no rotational movement in the drivetrain for the airplane itself. So the propellers we were hoping would be good, and the engines. Well, Harry did a good job, because when we did get down to the airplane, we were able to save the engines and all the propeller blades except for one, which is pretty remarkable. To get in the area, let me just back up a second. We were the 13th expedition to go in search of the lost squadron, and they were first located in 1983. Okay, so from 1983 to 1992, all of the expeditions within that period could go out to the glacier using the GPS and a theodolite, locate the airplanes, and attempt to recover them. Here's the GPS that we actually used. And this is a theodolite that we would use to triangulate off of known terrain features to further locate the airplanes. And then once we had those two devices staked out, then we would use this radar. It's a very low frequency, modified ground penetrating radar to actually locate the airplanes. What you see here is, in this green box, there's a computer and some batteries. And the thing on skis back there, that's the antenna for the radar unit. And Bill would put his snowshoes on and just drag this thing across the ice until we locate all of the airplanes. Now, it's very important for us to locate all of the planes, because we specifically wanted what we called at that time P-38 Delta, or Glacier Girl today. And so what we did, we located all of the airplanes, and then from an aerial photograph, we could pick out which one we wanted. And that's how we didn't come across Glacier Girl by chance. We actually wanted her. Okay, the radar unit, the airplanes are first located in '83, and that team marked the location of all the airplanes. This is what a P-38 looks like to the radar unit. You can see those blips. When we were melting down to Glacier Girl, at 62.5 feet, our melting device stopped going down because we hit the marker that was left there by the 1983 expedition. So we were in exactly the same place where those guys said the airplane was, and we were right there. We had to take the melting unit out of the hole. We had to go down, move the piece of plywood that was down there, and then continue on. So that was something that happened that we weren't really anticipating. Once we located the airplane, we are operating out of this airport here. This is in Kulusuk, Greenland. And if you go centerline 76 miles, you will overfly the camp where we were recovering the airplanes. That's a dirt strip, so we would go out with the wheels down. Okay, when you get to the ice cap, you notice they're on skis here. Okay, and we'd land on the glacier with two airplanes using skis. We used this twin-engine Dornier and also a DC-3 on skis to bring out 38,000 pounds of equipment and 6,000 pounds of food to do the operation. We got on the ice cap on the 6th day of May, and we left on the 22nd of August with one complete airplane. Here we are unloading the DC-3. Logistically, when we put this thing together, we had 62 days to do that. And we knew we didn't have any heavy equipment handling machinery. So we had to keep all our packaging as small as possible. This is about the heaviest piece we had. That weighed about 450 pounds, and inside that was the melting unit. So we devised a set of ramps here to have things slide down, and we bought these two sleds that we would put things on there and push it around. We were consuming 2.5 barrels of fuel a day, and that's a combination of avgas and jet fuel. And again, we had to move that stuff. There was a lot of it to move, and you see we were just rolling them down these ramps, and when they get down to the bottom, the guys would pick them up and carry them away. We had to have very strong guys on the ice cap. Those are empty. I like to show this one because it looks like the guys are strong. But really, we were very concerned about the ecology of the glacier, so we backhauled everything that we could so that we wouldn't contaminate the glacier. Here's the camp from about 3,000 feet. Now, the ocean is 14 miles away this way, and the ocean sea level, and we're about 2,500 feet AG above sea level right there. Let me bring it a little closer. There we are. Okay, this over here is the tent area where we were actually melting down to recover the airplane. This here is the mess hall, and these are sleeping huts, and that was the outhouse. Here's our life inside the camp. We brought just about everything that we needed. We had generators, we had a hot water tank. We figured out a way to melt a water well into the glacier. We had pumps. We had electric stove there, so our camp was pretty nice. And this was the social center, of the whole operation right there. We brought a ham radio with us, and every morning at 7 o'clock and every evening at 7 p.m., we would effect communications with the states. There was a special net. It was called the International Air Traffic Controllers Net that was set up to support us. And this is where we would pass on our progress, our logistical requirements. And this is only our only contact with the outside world until this thing showed up. And this is a satellite telephone. It's not marvelous. This is 1992. Technology wasn't like it is today, where satellite technology and cell phones and all that. We didn't have any of that, but this thing was pretty neat. After we put it all together, and this is the compact version, after we put it all together and plugged it in, you could call anywhere in the world, and it was just as clear as a bell. It was really a good thing to have. The guys would get on it and call their wives and their girlfriends, and it was really cool until we got our first month's phone bill, and it was $18,000. So. So we put that thing away real quick. And we only used it from that point on in the event there was an emergency. Wildlife, we did have one bird show up the whole time we were on the glacier, and that's the only wildlife that we saw the whole time we were there. But the weird thing about this little bird was that he wasn't afraid of man. You could pick him up. He'd probably never seen a man before, so it was really, really weird. One guy put him in his jacket and went cross-country skiing with him for a while. But this bird showed up on the eve of our very first, this was early May, and the weather had so far had been pretty good. And this little birdie shows up right on the eve of our first really bad weather that we had, and we had several days of that. But anyway, let me explain to you what this phenomenon was. This is the beginning of it, and this is what we call a ground blizzard. And the glacier at its highest point in Greenland is, like 10,000 feet high. It's a plateau, and then it falls off down towards the ocean. And we were at 2,500 feet above sea level, so there's 7,500 feet of glacier on top of us. Well, there's the winds up there. When the atmospheric conditions are proper, they call what they call katabatic winds, and the air literally falls off the glacier. Well, as it falls off the glacier, it picks up its velocity, and it's really cold in Greenland. It's like 20 below, and the surface is snow. It's ice crystals almost, and it's loose, so that when this wind starts to blow, it's just picking up the surface of the glacier and blowing it laterally across the ground. Here's another picture of it. At its peak, the wind was blowing well over 100 miles an hour, and it was the ambient air temperature before wind chill was 20 below, so it was pretty nasty out there. Now this is a surface phenomenon. It's like from the surface up to 300 feet above it, and then on top of that, the wind is calm and the sun is out. But on the surface, this is what you're looking at. Here's the picture of Gordon Scott. He was out in that ground blizzard for about 20 minutes. And Gordon was not hurt there. You can see he's pretty well iced up. You need coffee to thaw out. The landing of the Lost Squadron, the 13 expeditions, there's never been a serious injury. Okay? We take pride in the fact that, we go out and do these very dangerous things, and guys have to work in the environment that you see Gordon here. And we're able to do it because we train the guys and we properly equip them. So before we get onto the ice cap, we take precautions, through training and inspections of what kind of clothes they bring to make sure that everyone's protected. Snows a lot in Greenland. One of the things every morning we had to do is shovel out the outhouse. And this again is like mid-May. You can see how much snow is falling there. I'm going to show you just another complete set here of some weather pictures. This is the tent that I slept in, and it's all covered with snow, and that was good. Now, every morning when you woke up, the snow would build up in front of your door, and it would be like right across to there. we put together this whole expedition in Atlanta, Georgia, and we brought even down to Douglas, Georgia, and tested it, right? And so it doesn't snow in Georgia, I guarantee it. So the first time we have weather, we have all these tents, you know, set up, and we're in there, and in the morning we woke up, and you know, we couldn't open the doors because they opened out and not in. So we learned real quick. So we had a carpenter with us, so his job that day was make all the doors open in. And I don't know if most of you probably were here for the movie earlier, and they showed the door opening with the snow all the way up on it. And well, this is how it would be in the morning. The tent being covered like that was good because in Greenland at this time of year it's light all the time, and the wind's always blowing. Your tent shakes and you can't sleep because it's too light. So once your tent gets covered up with snow, it's insulated and it's actually stays warmer that way. And at this time of year, it never got above zero. So even though it was insulated, and we had a kerosene heater in there to keep our socks dry, but it was pretty chilly. Here's our mess hall, 12 feet high. Give you an idea of how much snow we had. That was the antenna for our ham radio. This is a picture of Roy Schaffner, and I like to show this one because here he is holding a shovel, because a shovel was man's best friend. If you weren't doing anything directly towards recovering the airplane, you were digging out snow from someplace. Here's the top of that mess hall right there. Here's the top of one of our support tents. This is a typical weather, not a weather day. This was a typical day in May and going into June on the ice cap. We had very few sunny days. We did have some sunny days, but normally the wind's blowing, and this is the kind of look that you had to deal with all the time. Here's a picture of the mess hall. Now this, I said that it was light all the time. This picture was taken like at 11 o'clock at night. So to give you an idea how, and because of this, we were working 24 hours a day anyway. We had 3 shifts going to get this done. We get to Greenland. We find the airplanes on radar. We bring all the equipment out. We set our camp up. Now it's time to go recover the airplane. Here's the plan. We'll make a shaft down to the aircraft using a melting device I'll show you here in a minute. And then using hot water, we will make a room or a cave around the airplane. Then we'll send a team down. We'll take the airplane apart just the way it was put together in the factory. And then we'll raise it all to the surface and move it off the ice and go flying. So here's how we did that. The first step in that process is to locate the airplane. You see these stakes in the ground. Well, that's where the radar and the theodolite say where the airplane should be. So using this device here, coming out of the end of this pipe is hot water. It's 180 degrees, coming out at 3,000 PSI. And we're going to use that to probe down to actually touch the airplane. Once we touch it, then we know where to set up, all right, to put our big 4-foot diameter melting unit, into operation. This thing's really easy to work. Gordon's here, he's holding on to it. You just take it, you put it straight down into the ice, and you just let gravity pull it down. We had graduations on it, so we knew if we get down past 300 feet that we've missed the airplane. So we got to pick it up, move it to another location, and try it again. It took us 9 tries before we actually hit the airplane. And the one thing that Greenland lacks is water. There's really no water in Greenland because it's all ice. And it took about 75 gallons to make 1 probe hole. So in between probes, we were actually melting water to power this thing up. So we were actually melting 24 hours a day also. Okay, once we locate the airplane, this is the melting unit. We nicknamed it the Gopher. And this is what we actually used to melt the shaft down to the airplane. Kind of quick explanation. Hot water would be pumped in this here, and through a manifold inside there, we heat up these copper coils, all right? And the water would come in, hot water would come in at 180 degrees. Those copper coils would melt the ice. Gravity would pull it down. And then the hot water, the warmer water, it now would be returned back to the boiler to be reheated. Earlier in my presentation, I told you that we didn't have any heavy equipment to move things, and you're probably wondering where this thing came from. Well, that was actually left on the glacier at the end of the 1990 expedition. And we knew it, and we knew where it was, so again, we used the radar to find it. And here we are digging down there, 40 feet of snow in 2 years. So we dig down to it, we find it. There it is. And now the snow is way up here. So we get down there, Ouija Smith, one of our team members, he goes down to the unit, he takes the duct tape off, all the intakes and everything, connects in the battery, it's a starter, the thing starts right up after 2 years. Now, how do you get that out? Well, we had no way to lift it. So what we did, you see we got some chain here. We hooked chain to the bucket. We anchored the chain in the snow, and we used the hydraulics in the bucket to actually lift the tractor up, the skid steer up, and then while I was up in the air, we shoveled snow back in the hole. And we did that constantly till we get it up high enough where we could drive it out. But then, now we have the ability to move heavy things, which we didn't have before, so that was a blessing. Here's the boiler that we used to power up the melting unit. That's 900,000 BTU, big giant hot water tank, and we fired that up on jet fuel. Here's the melting unit, the Gopher, ready to go. Let me explain to you kind of a few of the things you're looking at. This here is a 5 horsepower, 16-stage deep well pump hooked to fire hose, and that's what we use to pump away the water that the melting unit would melt. Okay, here's hot water coming in, and 180 degrees in, 160 out, only 20 degrees of heat transfer there. This big pipe belongs to the melting unit. That little pipe is 1-inch steel pipe that we inserted in the hole when we first touched the airplane to use it as a guidance system. So now when everything gets working and the boiler's boiling the water and it's going down and gravity's pulling down, literally all this thing is doing is sliding down that pipe. Because we know the pipe's sitting on the airplane and we know where we're starting at. You would think that it would go straight down. It didn't. It kind of went down like a windy snake. And I'm going to show you a small film clip here in a second of what the hole looks like and what it kind of feels like to go down in the hole. Here's Neil Estes coming up out of the hole. He had just been down there to see the airplane for the first time. And here's what his ride looked like, a little film clip of the ride. You're sitting on a bosun's chair, and you're looking down, and you have his ice crystallized. You see the water running down the side of the cave there? There's a couple of holes. We eventually connected them. That's a good shot of what happens, Richard Taylor. That kind of gives you an idea of what the 25-minute ride up and down the hole would be like. This is the first picture taken of the airplane. This is the front windshield. Oops, let me back up here. Okay, this is the gun compartment, the nose, and this is the front window, side window, and this white stuff is ice. And to remove the ice from around the airplane, we use this device here called a water cannon. And once we got down in the hole, we took the pump out of the Gopher and we left the pump in the hole because we always wanted to fill up with water. So now what we were doing, we were pumping the water up to the boiler, heating it up, and then letting it come back down, right, to be shot out of the water cannon. And it was kind of steamy down there when you do that. You can see how the water just sprays on the ice, made this cave over there. And we did that until we uncovered the entire P-38. So that's, 37 feet from nose to tail, and I'll explain to you, we had to even go more than that and over 50 feet across. As we were melting, parts of the airplane started to just evolve out of the ice. Here's the right side propeller coming out. Here we are looking across the cockpit to the left engine. I'll tell you a good story about this propeller blade right there. I happened to be in the hole on the day that we were melting in this area, where we were melting the ice out from the propeller. And when I first saw the back of it, I said, man, we're done with this thing because it was bent way over like that. And as we melted the ice from around it, it went in real jerky motions like this. Stood straight up, and we're flying the airplane with that blade on it today. Really remarkable. Took us about 2 weeks to uncover the whole airplane. And then once that was done, we would send a team of men, and I'll show you that here in a minute. There's a pilot's combat helmet. We found that in the nose case, in the gun compartment. There's a picture that was taken on the day before we started to take the airplane apart to bring it to the surface. You see, we made these caves down the tail boom. All right, we didn't see a need, because of the shape of the P-38, we didn't see a need to melt away that, so we just melted down the tail booms. Well, as we were melting down, when we got to where the tail attaches to the boom, the tail was missing. Through the movement of the glacier, the tail had been ripped off, and we had to melt an additional 12 feet past where it connected in to find the tail. But we were able to get the complete airplane. Let me back up one. I also want to point out the fact that the airplane was armed with 450 caliber machine guns and a 20 millimeter cannon. Sent a team down. We took the airplane apart where it was assembled in the factory. Here's a tail boom coming up. Here's a wing coming up. Now, P-38's a pretty big airplane, and these components are pretty big. And you can see that, you know, this wing's more than 4 feet. And so you're probably wondering, how do we get all this stuff up a 4-foot hole? Well, I didn't tell you all of the story yet. But here's an engine come up. We can see we made a second hole, and we connected them both. And so now we're 8 feet across here. And that 8 feet, we were able to bring up the entire airplane except for the center section, which required us to enlarge the hole to 20 feet across. And that's one of the reasons why it took so long. Okay, when we got down to the airplane, we found it was armed. And for safety reasons, we took the bullets out, and then eventually the guns. We brought everything to the surface. And on the 4th of July, we fired those guns using the ammo that was with it for the 50 years. P-38 had a sterling war record, and primarily it's because those guns were located in the nose. And so where the pilots flying around and shoot, you know, you'd have 450 caliber machine guns and 120 millimeter cannon shooting at you at a cyclic rate of 650 rounds per minute. So there's quite a powerful gun platform. Here's a picture of the 55-gallon drum that we shot on the 4th of July using one bullet from the 20 millimeter cannon. Look at this.
3, 2, 1. You got it! Woo! Did it recoil?
Look at the size. Look at the size.
Wow.
All going in. It's a shape charge up there.
Look at the shrapnel. Did you see the ignition when it hit? Yeah.
Isn't that wild? July 15th, 1942, the Lost Squadron landed on a glacier. Well, we happened to be on a glacier on July 15th of 1992, exactly 50 years to the day when they landed. So we decided it'd be a good time to have a party. So we invited a whole bunch of people out to do that. We had almost 50 people on a glacier at that point. I want to point out a couple of people here. Okay, this here is Brad McManus, Lieutenant Brad McManus, that landed in 1942, flipped his plane over. He came out to see what was going on. And let's see, this guy is O.E. Toole. He's part of the 5-man rescue team from that small fishing village that risked their life to save the downed flyers of the Lost Squadron. So it was an honor for us to have them out there. We gave them both an opportunity to go down the hole, and neither one of them wanted to do it. They said they had good luck the last time they were there, and they wanted to keep their luck good, so they elected not to go on that. But I'll tell you, they really missed a treat, because going down that hole was, you know, really a great experience. Okay, here we are, mid-July, running out of time, we think. And so we've already made 3 holes here. We've got a 4th one going there, and the 5th one will go here, so we get our 20 feet there. So we decide what we're going to do is we're going to dig, shovel away this area here all the way down to save on some time. And when you couldn't stand on it, you sit in the bosun's chair and take a pickaxe, and you can see how he's chopping away that web there. And that was an experience, because you're sitting there in a bosun's chair, you're not anchored to nothing, so you're swinging, you're hitting, you're spinning around, and, you know, and it was a ride. And now you hear, you know, down the hole there, another 200 feet is where the airplane is, so it's kind of risky. Here is the airplane in the hole. And what we did is we took the wings and the tail off and the nose off, and we actually took the engines off to make the center section small. We rotated it, and as you can see it suspended there, so it's shaking. We're always afraid that the cables would break and it would fall back down in the hole. It was really a scary thing. Here's Yorn. You can see how we brought it up sideways. Now, we had some engineering that we had to figure out when we brought this thing up, because you can see this device here, and there's a couple of chain things in there. That's what we were using to lift the airplane from the hole. When we got to this point here, we were as high as what the lifts could bring it. So before we hooked the cables to lift the airplane, we had to hook the cables to the lowest part of the plane. So the cables aren't hooked up here, they're hooked way down the bottom. And our plan was, when we got to the top, we would hook the winches to it. You can see we got one here and there's one over here. And we would lift from the bottom and let the airplane fall out of the hole. And that's how we get the airplane without any cranes or derricks. That's how we get the airplane out of the hole. Here's August 1st, 1992, the first and only successful recovery of any of the airplanes from the group called the Law Squadron. We used the Sikorsky helicopter to move the center section off of the Glacier to our base camp in Kulisuk. Give you an idea what things cost. It cost us $75,000 to move that thing 76 miles. So it was about $1,000 a mile. From there, we put it on a barge. We brought out to a freighter that was waiting, and we had to ship it to Denmark first, and then to Sweden, then to Savannah, Georgia, where we put it on a truck and we moved it to Middlesboro, Kentucky. Why Kentucky? The man who financed the recovery of the airplane and had a hangar in Middlesboro, and he offered that up for the restoration, and so we brought the airplane there. And this is October 26th of 1992. Here we are unloading it. And this is the date that we say that marks the end of the recovery and now starts the restoration. And this is what we had to work with. Okay, this is exactly what it looked like. So went out and hired a couple of guys, and we started to take the airplane apart. Our plan was fairly simple. Since we wanted to make this a flying airplane, we would take the broken pieces off of it and then fix those and put them back on, and we'd go flying. So we started to take the pieces off, and before you know it, we just started finding more and more damage. The airplane got smaller, and the big pile of broken pieces got bigger. Then before you know it, this is mid-January of '93, this is all we had left. One piece. Every single piece of that airplane was damaged in some shape, form, or manner. So we just had to, we didn't make a new airplane, we just saved a lot of the airplane. Let me describe for you some of the damages that we found. We had crushing damage. Okay, the weight and the pressures of the ice literally crushed just about almost any piece. We had tearing damage. Remember earlier I told you the tail was ripped off? Well, when the tail was ripped off, there's these really, thick cables that go from the control wheel down to the elevators and rudders and stuff in the back of the airplane. Well, every single pulley bracket was ripped out of the airplane, because as the tail separated, it was pulling on those cables until the cables literally snapped. The thing about it is if there's pilots here and you're ever concerned about swedged ends on cables, they will not pull off. The cable will snap, and I got proof of that before the swedged end will come off. There was a lot of magnesium on the airplane, and this is what it was supposed to look like, but this is what came with the kit. So magnesium wheel, and magnesium is really unstable in moist environment, and anything on the airplane that was magnesium or a magnesium alloy ended up looking like that. So we had a lot of work to do there. This is the IFF radio. IFF means identification friend or foe. And this box was in the right side tail boom of the airplane, and it was a top secret device during the war. The pilot was told that if he ever abandoned his airplane, that he would have to disable this. Well, you see those little bracket there? It's supposed to have a detonator in there, and from the cockpit you push 2 buttons and it blows it up. Well, for some reason it didn't have it, so Harry took his .45 out and blasted it full of holes. It did a good job, did a real good job, because they went through the radio, and this is the side of the airplane where the radiators go. You can see these bumps. Well, those are where the .45 bullets hit the side of the airplane, and also destroyed a lot of the mechanism for the oil, the radiators in that area. Allison V12, 1,225 horsepower, V12 engine. Both engines are salvageable. The propellers were able to save, they're Curtiss Electric props, able to save the entire system except for 1 blade on the left side. The fuel system, these are bullet resistance tanks. We just totally replaced those. They were junk. Okay. Now that I've told you what kind of damage you have, what I want to do is briefly and quickly go over how we built the airplane back up to flyable condition. The P-38 is made kind of like a sailboat, where you lay your keel, then you put your ribs, and you hook everything else to that. But your keel is the first piece that you lay down. Well, the main spar on a P-38 is like a keel. You got to build that up first. Then here it is being built, and then from there we'll add other components. This wheel well nacelle that will attach right like that to this spar, and we'll just continually build up the airplane. When we got Glacier Girl, we just thought it was, we didn't know much about P-38s at the time, and we thought it was just kind of like every other P-38, but we found out it was very different, because it was what we call an early model P-38. It was actually manufactured as an E model, then converted to an F model to go on Operation Bolero. So all the parts that we had went out and purchased to rebuild this thing didn't fit, because they were for a late model. Well, once we realized how special this airplane was, we changed our attitude in how we were going to fix it up. So we had decided that we were going to preserve as much of that airplane as we could humanly and obviously safely do. And we went so far as, and I'll show you some switches, we took the electrical switches apart, rebuilt them, and put them back in rather than just replace them. Here are all the pieces to the gondola or the cockpit, and here we are fitting them. These little black things are called clecos. They're temporary fasteners, and we use that to hold the airplane together. And then when we're sure everything fits, then we'll replace them with the screws or rivets or whatever. Here we are fitting the guns. Glacier Girl landed in 1942, had 62 hours on it. Never made it to combat, never modified. What you see here, these guns, the only complete set of P-38 guns in the world, right there. And it's only because when Glacier Girl landed, she had them there, and they were still there with the bullets and everything, so it's really neat. Here's an overhead shot. You can see that the airplane is starting to come together more completely. Starting to get some plastic in it. The aerospace industry was really kind to us when we were doing this project. We had well over $500,000 worth of contributions in products, services to do the operation. So that was a big help. There's our hydraulic lines. You can see the detail that we went through. All of the, like I said, we tried to save everything, like all these B-nuts and stuff. That was all original. We made new tubes, but we kept, we were able to save all of that. Original oil coolers. That switch right there, that's an inverter switch. That was in the ice for 50 years. Still works. Here's the cockpit of the P-38. We restored this airplane to exactly as it was as it left the factory. So when you sit in this cockpit, you can beam yourself back to 1942. It's exactly as it was, less this GPS. I think GPS came down a year or two after the airplane was made. Here, now the airplane's starting to come together pretty good. We're getting ready to finish all the sheet metal work up on it and get it to the paint. Here we are, we got it jacked up and we have the gear retracted. Got it prepped, ready to paint. Here are the painters. You notice we've got a book out here. And you can't see what it is, but it's a picture of this P-38. And not this one, but one of them like it. And what we're doing is we're trying to duplicate exactly the paint job. We went so far on the detail on the restoration of this airplane that the font for the little letters that mark all your panels and stuff did not exist. So we had to have the whole alphabet in a proper font design so that we could put the proper little numbers and letters on the airplane just the way it's supposed to be. Here's the paint job all finished up. Pretty proud of that. Named the airplane Glacier Girl. When the airplane was recovered on August 1st of '92, and we finally got it to the surface, there were 7 of us on a glacier, and over a bottle of Chivas Regal, we came up with the name Glacier Girl, and that's what it's named. And here, one of the mechanics, Robbie, is putting the nose art on the airplane because we're about to go flying. Here's a picture of Roy Schaffner addressing a crowd of more than 20,000 people that came to Middlesboro, Kentucky, a small town in a meteorite crater in Appalachians, a population of 17,000. We more than doubled it on the day that we flew Glacier Girl for the first time. Steve Henton from Chino, California, Planes of Fame Museum, came out to fly the airplane for us for the first time. Here's our first takeoff, and if you didn't see it on the movie earlier, here it is. We flew that day for 20 minutes, came in and landed. Everything seemed good. We did know that the left engine had some metal in the oil, so we were kind of concerned about that. So we flew it again the next day for 40 minutes. We had a total of 1 hour on the airplane. And we were still finding metal in the oil, so we had to pull the left engine out, send it back to the engine builder. He repaired the engine, brought it back to us. We had the airplane back in the air in May, and that's a pretty shot. Back in May, and that's when we attended our first air show and also did our first heritage flight, and this was in Columbia, Missouri. Heritage flight is a U.S. Air Force program where we fly vintage airplanes, P-51, P-38, F-86, F-15, all right, in honor of the servicemen that are on active duty today and everybody else that served our country. This is a program designed by the U.S. Air Force to honor all those servicemen and women. There's 2 P-38s and a P-47. P-38 Glacier Girl has now flown about 350 hours. When we were putting the airplane together, one of Mr. Schaffner's dreams was to finish the mission that we started back in 1942. To do Operation Bolero, but just continue on all the way to England. So in 2007, in June of 2007, we left the United States heading for England on Operation what we call Bolero 2. And there's Glacier Girl. You can see we got that. We also had a P-51 Mustang with us, Miss Velma. We made it all the way to Goose Bay. Had halfway across from Goose Bay to Narsarsuaq in Greenland, and the left engine started to act up. Had to turn around and go back, and we had to do a dual engine change in Goose Bay. You can see the engines here on the stand, no engines there. We were there, stuck there for like 30 days, changed the engines out, put them back on, and back flying again, went to Oshkosh, and continued on. Today, Glacier Girl is the crown jewel of Rod's fleet, based in San Antonio, Texas. We are going to do Bolero. We'll call it Bolero 3 here in a couple of years. And we're going to continue on flying. Glacier Girl, we go to many air shows. We fly heritage flights as much as we can. And like I said earlier, we have almost 350 hours on her. And she's flying great. In conclusion, I'd like to recognize publicly the efforts of Pat Epps and Richard Taylor, who formed the Greenland Expedition Society. And if it were not for their tenacity in going after these airplanes, that we would not have Glacier Girl here today. Recognize Roy Schaffner for his continued, when the Glacier Girl was sold to Roy Schaffner, he continued with that dream in ensuring that the airplane is flying. And of course, I got to recognize Rod. He's already been recognized once, but I got to do it again because he has taken great care of the airplane. All the nice pictures that I've been able to use here was taken by those 3 photographers. And at this point here, I'm going to say thank you very much for your time and attention, and we're going to open the floor up for questions.
Okay, we have any questions here? Yes, right here in front.
Is there any way to judge how much of the original aircraft was used after it was all put back together?
Is there any way to judge how much of the original aircraft was used in the restoration?
Yes.
Next question.
We were able to save approximately 80% of the airplane. Yeah. We spent a lot of time saving. We really did. It was important.
Yes.
Could you talk about some of the differences between the early model P-38 and late model?
Could you describe some of the differences between the early model P-38 and the later models?
Yes.
Yeah, again.
Through the E model, the canopy opened from left to right. Starting with the production F model, the canopy opened from front to back. Canopy differences. The engines continually were upgraded, but they were all V1710s. The original E model had 1,120 horsepower. The L model had almost 1,700 horsepower, so they improved those. The intercoolers on the early models were in the wings. In the later models, they were in the chin column. They were much more effective, so they were able to bring on larger engines. The late model, the late J's, and all L's had boosted ailerons, die brakes. They had extra fuel in the wings. And that's about the major differences.
We've got a later one out at Hazy if you want to take a look at it. Next question. Yes, right over here.
I saw you in Oshkosh in 2005 with Steve, and it was awesome. What a terrific show that was. What caused your dual engine change up in Goose?
Well,
What caused, we're recording this, and so we need to get the questions on the record. What caused your dual engine change at Goose?
well, we only had to change one. We only had one go bad. We had a cracked liner in one of the cylinders. But at that time there, we felt it was better to put 2 matching engines in, so we brought 2 engines in, and we did the dual engine change. The engines that were in the plane when we were flying across trying to make it to England were the original engines that came out of the Glacier. Okay, the engines that are in the airplane today are those replacements that we put in Goose Bay. The original engines are now back together. They're ready to go back in the airplane, and we're just waiting for the proper time to put them back in.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when the lost squadron was found, how did they find it? I mean, you're 14 miles inland on some ice.
When the lost,
It's not GPS. How were they able to be located?
how did they originally locate the lost squadron?
Way back when, in the early 80s, when they started looking,
No, in 1942.
oh, in 1942, how did they locate them?
Yeah.
For 2 or 3 days, they were able to run the radios on one of the bombers. Okay, so they sent out distress signals in code. And then there was a big search out for them. And one day, a Navy PBY just flew over them, found them, and then their location was noted ever since.
Yes.
Are there any plans for the remaining 5 P-38s or 2 P-17s?
Any plans for rescuing the remaining aircraft in the lost squadron?
In the years since we've recovered Glacier Girl, I know there's been several groups wanting to go, and in all cases, they couldn't get the funding to do so. Right now, there is a gentleman from California. His name escapes me right now. He does have a plan, and he says he's going next year to recover the airplanes. So wait and see what happens.
Okay. Yes, right. What was the total cost of the project?
To go to Greenland, now this is just the Glacier Girl project, not all of the expeditions. Okay, we spent $640,000 to get the airplane about, and then there was another $3.75 million. So it was about $4.5 million spent on that project.
Yes.
How many P-38s are in flying condition?
Do you know how many P-38s are in flying condition today?
Yeah, today there's 7 flying P-38s. There's 6 in the U.S. and 1 in Austria. Right? There's about 5 more out there that, with a minimum amount of work, maybe engine change, you know, they could be made flyers. But right now, actively flying, there's 7.
Way in the back, up here on the left. Yep, you with ball cap?
Yeah, in your original story regarding how the squadron got lost, you said it received coded messages that the airports were closed. They believe that. That seemed to imply that that was incorrect information.
Yeah,
In your presentation, you indicated that they received coded messages that the airports are closed, and the way you presented it, it sounded like you were suspicious that it might not be authentic. Was that the case?
yeah. Both airports are open, and they received their briefing on July 14th. And what we suspect happened is that they didn't flip the code book over to the 15th when they're reading the codes, so they're reading all the codes incorrectly.
Attention to detail. Okay, right back up here, right in the center in the middle there. Way back up.
Have you used any of the guns since you blew up the barrel?
Can you, did anybody hear that? Can you, a little louder? Say it again.
Have you used any guns since you blew up the barrel?
Well, they used one of them, we know. Have you used any of the guns?
Since to bring the guns into the United States, we had to, what we call them, demill the guns. In others, we had to make them inactive. And when we put them back together, we had to do them under ATF supervision, and they are not operational today.
But did you shoot any of them?
Only on that day. The
Okay.
last time we
Just
shot
that
them
one
was,
time.
was that July 4th.
Okay, all right. There's 2 right together here. Can you decide on between you?
According to what you said, there's 38% of the cargo going over to Europe was sunk. Has anybody thought about trying to dig around in the bottom of the sea to see if they can?
Well, you mentioned that there was about 38% of the shipping was lost over the North Atlantic. Has anybody thought about going down and trying to get them out of the ocean?
I don't know. I think we'll have to ask Bob Ballard that question.
Okay, go ahead with the second part.
Does the Department of Defense ever effectuate a claim on aircraft property?
Does the Department of Defense ever exercise its claim on recovered property?
The government protects our tax dollars very well, so they never give up anything. However, in the case of the airplanes from the lost squadron, the wreckage to those airplanes were burned up in a fire back at Maxwell Air Force Base in the mid-60s, I think it was. So anyway, a letter was sent to the Air Force explaining what GES was going to do to recover these airplanes. They received back a letter from the Air Force stating that if they were able to recover the airplanes, the government would not lay claim to them.
Yes, ma'am, right here.
Do you have any idea how many P-38s did Bolero type successfully?
Do you have any idea how many P-38s did successfully complete that Bolero
No, I
route?
don't. No, I don't have a number on that. I know 6 of them didn't make it.
Okay, right over here on the left.
How many P-38s were produced?
10. Oh. Sorry, Jack.
Did you finish the question?
Yeah.
I'm an old guy, I can't hear very well. Speak it up. How many
were produced?
How many P-38s were produced total?
10,038 P-38s during a full production run were manufactured.
Okay, right here on the right.
Why was
I guess, why didn't they salvage them immediately and take them back for parts during the war?
Back then, first of all, we're at war, and these are expendable airplanes. It didn't support the war effort to put the men and the material and the manpower in to go pick up those airplanes. It was better up, in support of the war effort, to leave them right where they were.
Yes.
What was the major function of the P-38s? What was its specialty as an airplane?
What was the major function of the P-38 fighter?
If the P-38 was made today, we'd call it an F-38 fighter, but back then, P meant pursuit. Okay, and it was designed to be an interceptor, a high-altitude interceptor. Get airborne quick, fly up, have good armament. But during the war, the P-38 was used in all theaters of operations for all the different kinds of roles that an armed airplane could do. They even used them for medevacs. They took their drop tanks and made them people pods. I mean, they did all sorts of things. They used them as a bomber. But its main mission was a pursuit airplane, a high-speed, high-altitude interceptor.
I think photo also.
Photo
okay.
recon, definitely.
Okay.
15
Up here on the
different
right, up high.
How long did it take you to, from the time you brought the PT to the surface before you had it flying again, first flight?
How long from the time you got the airplane to the surface of the ice before it was flying?
2 days longer than 10 years.
Whoa, okay, right here.
Knowing what you know now, if you went back in time, what would you do differently?
Knowing what you know now, if you had to do it over again, what would you do differently?
Well, I'd definitely bring a series. I'd make my water hotter to make the cave bigger. That's one thing. Probably bring a washer and a dryer so we could wash our clothes. We overlooked that. So. I'm trying to think of what else. No, I think that's what I'd probably change more than anything else. And maybe the method of uncovering the airplane itself, rather than use a water hose. I think I'd use like a big giant sprinkler or something like that, one of those heavy duty jobs.
Okay, right here and up, yes.
Is the plane on display in San Antonio?
The airplane is at the International Airport in San Antonio. We do not have a museum, but we do allow people to come in with an appointment to see the airplane.
Okay, can't see, yes, right there.
What's the true airspeed of that plane?
What's the true airspeed at cruise, you mean?
Well, what's max? Yeah,
What's the cruise speed and also what max speed of the airplane?
Well, I'm not a P-38 pilot. Rod,
Rod, you want to try that one?
Yeah, I'd say the cruise airspeed that I normally fly at, say at 20, 30, is probably 220 miles an hour. The airspeed indicator is actually not in knots, it's in miles per hour.
How fast you ever had it?
About 400. Max speed that I've had it, 400. Yeah, I've got about 100 hours in the airplane out of the 350 hours on it. Steve Hinton and myself are the only pilots that have ever flown this airplane since restoration.
Okay, yes, right here.
Yes, sir. This airplane has nice big external fuel tanks. Number one, were they on there when they flew in 1942? And number two, were those special just for that airlift or not?
The airplane as depicted here has external fuel tanks. Were they on there for this mission? And if so, were they specially configured for that?
During Operation Bolero in 1942, yes, it did have drop tanks. And each one of those tanks is 150 gallons. And when we recovered the airplane, the drop tanks were not on it. But we since purchased some drop tanks, so that when we went on Operation Bolero, we had the drops on it.
Yeah.
What are your maintenance costs per flight hour now to keep it going?
What's your maintenance cost per flight hour to keep it going?
Actually, it's not too bad. I don't know what it is per flight hour, but it's not high. You know, it's a brand new airplane, and everything works. You know, so but right now it's not very high.
Yeah. Okay, here. Do you know what the original name on the airplane was?
When we recovered the airplane, there was no name on it. So that's why we called it Glacier Girl after we recovered it. In going through the history of the pilot Harry Smith, we suspect, and we only found this out many, many years later, that he called his sailboat Sweet Pea after P-38. So we suspect he would probably call this airplane Sweet Pea, but we don't know that for sure.
Yes, right here. Why did you want what? This plane? Why did you want this plane?
It was the best one. Seriously, it was the best airplane. We looked at all the pictures that were taken in 1942 to determine the condition of all the airplanes. And Harry Smith, when he landed, he shut his engines off and feathered his props. So when he landed, there was no rotational movement. All of the other guys, when they landed, some guys knocked their props off. One guy knocked his engine off, one guy knocked his tail off, one guy flipped over. So Glacier Girl was in the best shape in 1942. And we made the assumption that it would be still in the best shape in 1992. So I believe that we made the right choice.
Okay, pal, right here. Where are the guns on Glacier Girl right now?
Right now, they are right in the nose of the airplane. If you look on this picture, right up there, that's where the guns are, right there.
Bob, you might
Okay.
talk about the bullets that are in the.
Oh, yeah, that's, thank you, Rod. Talking about the guns, the whole period while we were restoring Glacier Girl, we had a lot of people come and visit. Many, many, many World War II P-38 pilot come to see this airplane. We started a program where we took inert rounds, 50 caliber rounds, and we had these P-38 pilots sign them. Have over 175 signatures, and every time that airplane flies, those signed bullets are in the nose of that airplane.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Are there any members of the Lost Squadron still alive?
Any members of the Lost Squadron still alive?
Yes, I know Brad McManus is still alive, and he is the only one I know of right now.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Is this a burning? Okay, let's hear it.
When you replaced the broken and torn skin panels, did you use the same alloys as they used in 42, or did you use modern?
When you replaced the broken and torn panels, did you use the same alloys or did you go to modern technology?
This aluminum that was used back then is the same aluminum as we have today. They call it different stuff. Back then, it was 23 SD. Now it's 2023, but it's the same alloy, same aluminum, just a different numbering on them. We duplicated each piece exactly as the manufacturer's drawings call for. From the Smithsonian, we got 10,000 frames of microfilm that had all the parts of the airplane on it. So we're able to go using that and the erection maintenance manual. We're able to duplicate each piece, not only in dimensions but also in composition.
Appreciate that plug for our archives, which is, and you can see them in all their glory out there at Hazy here in about April of next year. Bob, thank you very much for a great presentation. We really appreciate it. Rod, we appreciate you making the airplane and Bob available. And General Electric, thank you for this opportunity tonight. And to all of you, thanks for supporting our program. If you'll exit by the rear doors, Bob and Rod will be available in the Milestones Gallery out there by the visitor's desk if you have any additional questions or you're interested in autographs. But thank you very much for coming this evening. Good night.
That was fun.